We hear the term toxic workplace thrown around a lot, but what does it really take for a global giant to actually confront its own deep-seated problems? Well, this isn't a story about a company having a sudden moment of clarity and deciding to do better. Oh no. This is the story of a company being dragged kicking and screaming into a corner where it was finally forced to face the truth.
This one sentence right here gets to the absolute heart of it. This came from an independent review into the massive mining company Rio Tinto. And the key phrase is open secret. The bullying, the harassment, the constant psychological abuse, none of it was actually hidden. People knew. It was just accepted as part of the job.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How does something everyone knows but nobody talks about finally burst out into the open? Well, it wasn't a sudden change of heart from the top. It was a chain reaction, really. A series of massive failures that just kept piling up until the company had absolutely no other choice. And here's the interesting part. The whole thing didn't start with an HR complaint or a whistleblower. It started with a totally separate, catastrophic event that, on the surface, had nothing to do with workplace bullying, but it revealed everything about the company's broken culture.
Back in May of 2020, Rio Tinto blew up these 46,000-year-old sacred indigenous rock shelters at Juukan Gorge in Australia. The backlash was, immediate and global. It sparked a parliamentary inquiry, and by the end of the year, the CEO and other top execs were out. This disaster showed the world the company's DNA, a system that would ignore any warning and prioritize profits and output above literally everything else. And that first crack in their public image, it was about to become a canyon.
So once that first crack appeared, the pressure just started flooding in from all sides. The intense scrutiny that began with the destruction of heritage sites, well, it quickly turned inward towards the day-to-day experience of the company's own employees.
First, a new government inquiry started digging into abuse happening at mining camps. And let's be clear, this wasn't Rio Tinto volunteering information, this was the government demanding answers. Then, the media latched on, and brave survivors started sharing their stories publicly, revealing this deeply disturbing pattern of fear and intimidation.
And this is where the whole idea of a bad culture stops being an abstract concept and becomes just terrifyingly real. I mean, stop and think about this. The atmosphere was so threatening that workers had to create their own informal buddy systems just so they'd feel safe enough to walk from one building to another. We're not talking about a minor problem here. This is a complete breakdown of basic safety and trust.
And it gets worse. Women at these remote mining camps reported being legitimately afraid to just walk by themselves after dark, in the very place they were supposed to live and work. These aren't just bullet points on a report. This is the reality of the daily psychological weight people were carrying. A culture of fear wasn't just growing, it had completely taken over. Okay, so with all this human suffering finally coming out, the company must have jumped into action, right? Not so fast. The real turning point, the thing that really got them to move, was when this stopped being seen as just a people problem and started looking like a massive threat to the business itself. You can really see the two sides of the coin here. On one side, you have the awful human cost, the fear, the abuse, the systemic issues. But on the other side, you have the things that really get a boardroom's attention. The threat of lawsuits, a nosedive in their ESG score, that's their environmental, social, and governance rating, hefty government fines, and even the possibility of losing their license to operate altogether. And that was the tipping point. After the Juukan Gorge disaster, huge institutional investors, the people with the real money, started asking some very, very tough questions about the company's governance. All of a sudden, workplace culture wasn't some soft HR issue anymore. It was a material financial risk, something that could tank the stock price. So you've got this perfect storm brewing. The public is outraged, politicians are investigating, and now investors are getting nervous. The company's new leadership was basically painted into a corner. They were left with a decision that wasn't really a choice at all.
You can literally watch the dominoes fall, one right after the other. The huge public scandal created the opening. Then government scrutiny brought legal pressure. The media exposure made the human cost impossible to look away from. And finally, that financial threat made doing nothing simply not an option. The only move they had left was to launch a huge, credible, and most importantly, external investigation. And that became the Broderick Review. Now, this wasn't some small internal audit that could be quietly shelved. No way. This was a high-profile global review led by a highly respected outsider. And honestly, its main job wasn't just to find the truth. It was to send a powerful signal to investors, to regulators, and to the public that, finally, the company was being forced to take this seriously.
So after all that pressure, what did this forced look in the mirror actually show them? Well, the findings pretty much confirmed what everyone feared. The culture was so broken, it was completely incapable of fixing itself.
The review found that horrible behavior wasn't just happening, it was normalized. It was just how things were. Known serial offenders were often protected or just tolerated. And employees who might have wanted to speak up, they were absolutely terrified of retaliation, and probably for good reason. No one trusted the official reporting channels to do a single thing.
Which brings us to this really sobering final thought. For years, the abuse was an open secret inside Rio Tinto, and nothing happened. The system didn't change because people were suffering. It only began to change when that secret got out, and the cost to their reputation, their legal standing, and their bottom line became too high to ignore. And it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What does it say about corporate accountability when the only thing that can truly force a change is getting caught?